Well, and this video is going to be a return to Aristotelian ethics. But in this video, I wanted to actually talk more in depth about sexuality in particular and the discourse around today, which is kind of funny. It's not really about whether or not hedonistic attitudes are taking place or if there's consequences for it. It's just that there's no dialogue about it, whether or not it's happening. It's either you celebrate it or you don't, and obviously we're doing the latter here on this channel. And so what does it kind of look like in an Aristotelian ethical way? And he is pretty explicit about the idea of displaying loyalty to the good wife. Obviously, it's a hierarchical political scheme he's putting forth in his text. But when we're talking about the ideas of actually showing loyalty in relationships, it's kind of this meme philosophy now of, sure, that sounds good on your social media portals of talking about loyalty, but you see this person's attitude outside of the online realm, and you got to question whether or not they're actually following through. So there's that kind of aspect to it that is pretty peculiar for our time, this hyper-modern time of being this social peacock online and misrepresenting yourself in this catfish way. I think the physical material idea of a catfish, right? The kind of not being who you say you are and acting as someone else. I think that pales in comparison to the ethical fallout from technology and the internet at large, and the collapse of the community into this into these social apps. And I think it leads to a lot of dishonorable behavior, especially when it comes to our sexuality and misrepresenting ourselves. And it was kind of just kind of an aside now, but there is that kind of problem that I think Aristotle could see with the idea of sex between the genders on its own, and what that entails through the particulars of man's self-esteem, right? Is usually reliant on how much sexual access he could have in the greater community around him. Whereas, a woman, and there is tons of psychology on this about a woman's self-esteem tends to decline as she becomes more promiscuous. And it's something that the feminists don't really talk about, but it is kind of interesting to maybe look at the idea of independence between the genders, and how it differs in with Aristotle, in that he's talking about the kind of interdependence of finding independence through an institution like a monogamous relationship, right? To find independence through the good, through the ethic. And the other part of that is we have to consider the consequences of our own brothers around us, and our sexuality comes into play with that. Aristotle talks about to forsake your wife, it could lead to the damaging of other sons, or the creation of them. He's kind of talking about fatherlessness, right? You don't want to have a bunch of sons outside of your own marriage. You can't handle the duties of being a father, of being the archetype of the political ruler in a household. So we have to consider that, and we see this all the time in American within minority communities, especially. They're far more likely to forsake their marriage, if even pursue it at all to begin with. A lot of the discourse is stuck in this kind of material idea of this legalistic idea of a relationship, right? It's like bound up in these ideas about like tax write-offs and whatnot. These are stuff that people talk about, whether or not it filing joint or not, and things like this, and actually using that as a justification for why they won't get married or whatever the circumstance may be, right? This is a pretty interesting, albeit I find kind of vacuous way of seeing marriage, and how it differs from Aristotle or any of the classic civilizations or any civilization prior. But he also kind of talks a bit about woman's happiness being kind of in tandem with the health and well-being and happiness of your society as a whole. You're probably not going to find a lot of optimism with a bunch of men, and so that kind of goes back to where I sort of started with woman's happiness being in tandem with having a less laissez-faire sexual history. I think there's good evidence about like the happiest of women out of all surveyed seem to just be the one partner, one marriage life. And there is a lot of people who could say, well, I mean, this is just a kind of faux way of living your life. It's just because you didn't try out or anything. This was probably be what someone who would be critical of this would say. But there is consequences for wisdom. We talk about this kind of on taking the red pill, right? The red pill has consequences. And in a way, a red-pilled experience, using your empiricism, exploring out and being, open, if you will, could lead to drawbacks. And, if happiness is something that you want to strive for, then I think women taking note of their sexual history and not indulging in hookup culture is for the best for their happiness. I think that's a pretty benign statement, honestly, but a lot of people would probably have an issue with that. And I think if you want to kind of look at it from strictly a biological sense, right? The egg is far more sacred. It's produced at a far less expendable rate than sperm cells would be. And so that alone, in kind of this evolutionary way, is to show the like kind of sacredness of why a woman wouldn't want to indulge with something that's far more dangerous for her. The implications for her are far greater, right? I mean, any man is probably some double, even triple the grip strength of the average woman, right? Ronda Rousey famously kind of pointing out that she would get absolutely demolished in an intergender fight, even with a guy at the bar, right? Because the grip strength difference is just so high. And I think also kind of going off into a different way, we could consider how when so I think maybe getting a little bit more on track and considering the human being as the sort of political animal that we've been talking about lately, that would obviously entail to a sort of rational sexual decision making. And like I said, if we were just to continue on this biological sort of route, the species of animals, as you go up the hierarchy, as you go up with intellect, the sexual process becomes more and more difficult to and sacred, and less numerous, obviously. And for Aristotle, when he talks about different hierarchies kind of the soul, and the difference between animals, and the difference of being this kind of the vegetative idea of what's the difference between a man who can't escape the circus of his own mind than just a cabbage. It's just reproduction and just sleeping and sustenance. That's all you care about. So being a political animal is standing on your own 2 feet, of being actual human, and understanding that this is a part of the entire idea of trying to be rational. And but what about the implications of the greater community? And we see when society sort of has this sexual inequality, where you kind of have the chads running around forsaking their good wives and being promiscuous. This takes away, and we all know the sort of 80-20 rule that we hear on modern dating apps, where 20% of men get sexual access to 80% of the women. And this obviously leads to a lot of implications for outsiders looking in. What happens to the average guy trying to just sort of have any sort of prospects at all? And you actually kind of see this in this demented way in our culture, especially on the left, where you shame the incel, and make fun of how he has this sexual inadequacy. He doesn't have any interests or any partners, and this is to be seen as a good thing, because he's this trash. He's this usually white male character, or scarecrow, as I kind of like to call him. And it's always telling when it comes to actually relishing in the sort of cosmic karma that people build about their scapegoats. That's when you really tell what they're really kind of thinking about. We see this all the time. It's the classic with the demographics, right? And that, especially that viral clip way back in the day of that Young Turks presentation, where they pointed out that white people were becoming a minority, and everyone kind of cheered and clapped. It's things like this. And so, shaming the incel for knowing that he's in this uphill battle just to simply be acknowledged by the other gender, it's pretty debilitating. I think it's a shame that people relish at other people's suffering for things like this. And so I wanted to just sort of do a little video about the idea of trying to think about your own sexuality, not in this sort of free-flowing desire, sort of neoliberal, it's all about me, whatever I'm doing is it's no one's business, it's behind my own closed doors. You should actually consider what the implications are for your fellow man and for women at large. There's that famous line that Jesse Lee Peterson said in that street clip where he talks about being a slut maker. Don't be a slut maker. Try to find or mold a woman towards being the good wife, which is a very, very challenging thing to do. I'm not saying that I've done it by any stretch, but we have to ultimately inspire other people to actually want to indulge in the kind of lifestyles that we're trying to advocate for. And it's pretty hard when you have a constant downpour that's sort of trying to get in your way, or you feel like the direction of things isn't going in the way you want. Turning that around, it's sort of trying to hit the brakes and hope for the best. And then if you can actually survive the car crash, then you can kind of go from there and make the best of it. So with that, I think I'm done on this little ramble video. Thanks guys for watching. I really, really appreciate all the views I got for the autobiography series. That really means a lot to me. I really felt like I bared all in those videos. So I appreciate all the support and feedback and love that I got for that. But yeah, thanks for watching.